Okay, great. So we're going to cover today how MSPs use CloudBerry's managed backup and AWS to generate better profit margins. Doug, if you want to chime in so I can see if we can hear you, we will probably be good. I don't hear you yet, so I'm just going to continue. Again, my name's David Gugick. I'm the guy on the left there on your screen. I'm here with Doug Hazelman, our VP of Technical Marketing. He's the guy in the middle with the cool beard and haircut. He's going to be talking to Jim Smith, founder and CEO of Proper Sky. He's an MSP in the Philadelphia region who's been using CloudBerry managed backup with AWS to provide amazing backup services and while generating a lot of profit for himself. He's been delivering that solution for a while. And we also have, happily from the AWS side, Peter Kisich. He's on the partner solutions architecture side. And he's going to be talking about all the great things that you can do with AWS on the storage side primarily. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter to talk to you about AWS. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I'll start with the AWS Global Infrastructure, which enables customers to move their workloads and data globally with instantly available compute and data services. So today we have 21 geographic regions comprised of 64 availability zones. I know that's right on the slide. When I submitted it, we had just recently added Hong Kong, so that's why there's more now. And we actually have announced plans as well to add 4 more regions in Bahrain, South Africa, Indonesia, and Italy. And so these regions are made up of availability zones, which are physically separate buildings, separated by meaningful distance. Think miles, and in most cases, many miles. And availability zones are big. And AZ can represent multiple data centers with hundreds of thousands of servers. And for AWS, that is just a basic building block of our global infrastructure. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And so within our infrastructure, we have a very mature set of native storage offerings. And so let's start with file protocol access solutions. And so here we have 2 different services. We have Elastic File System and Amazon FSx. With Amazon Elastic File System, customers get a simple, highly scalable, and durable NFS file system for Linux-based workloads. EFS scales up to petabytes without any disruption to your application. It's completely elastic. And it grows and shrinks automatically when you add and delete data, ensuring that you have the capacity you need and you pay for only the capacity you consume. Also with EFS, we offer standard and infrequent access tiers. So you can use lifecycle management. For example, I can move files after 30 days to a lower cost class while keeping them in the same global namespace. And lastly, EFS is a regional service, so it's highly durable across multiple availability zones that we talked about earlier. FSx is a bit different. FSx comes in 2 flavors, FSx for Windows File Server and FSx for Lustre. FSx for Windows File Server is a fully managed native Microsoft Windows file system built on Windows servers. And this ensures that you have the compatibility and SMB features that parity that Windows-based applications kind of rely on. It's also back-ended by SSD storage, providing very high throughput and IOPS. And it's priced with those 2 vectors in mind. So you're priced on capacity and also the performance that you need. And so you can purpose fit it for a bunch of different workloads. And FSx for Lustre is optimized for high performance computing workloads. And so it works natively with Amazon Simple Storage Service, S3, to make it easy to process the data in cloud object storage on a high performance file system. So this is transparent, presenting the S3 objects as files to the HPC workload. On the block storage side, we have Amazon Elastic Block Storage and Amazon EC2 Instant Storage. So let's start with EBS, Amazon EBS. It provides persistent block storage to instances and covers a wide array of use cases and workloads. These workloads are supported by different volume types that are available, such as IO1 for high ops requirements, GP2, which is the most commonly used type with burstable performance, which is well suited for boot drives, and even down to SC1 volumes, which is for cold and less frequently accessed data. And so EBS has snapshot capability as well, and we just released the capability to take snapshots with crash consistency across multiple EBS volumes for an EC2 instance. And we just did that yesterday. So we're constantly evolving and adding features to these services. EC2 instance storage is ephemeral, meaning it doesn't persist like EBS. Once the EC2 instance is terminated, the storage is gone. The advantage here, though, is that the storage is local and to the instance. And so latency-sensitive workloads like caching or analytics workloads where the data is persisted elsewhere are a good fit for this solution. Next, we go to the object storage, and object storage now falls under the S3 family, but there's different classes of S3 storage, which we'll cover in more depth on the next slide. These classes support use cases such as highly distributed fast access, all the way down to long-term archiving. And S3 is a regional service, which means that it's protected across availability zones, and it provides 11 nines of durability. So it's highly reliable object storage. Along with these storage services, we have multiple options for customers to move their data to AWS. So let's start here with AWS Direct Connect. This service makes it easy for customers to establish private and secure connections between AWS and their on-premise data center, their office, a co-location facility. We see this used often if there's a significant amount of backup going on to AWS on a daily basis. So customers usually tend to go with a Direct Connect implementation. For those with weaker capabilities for connecting and networking, we offer AWS Snowball. And since most backup software is incremental forever now, getting the initial full backup can be a challenge for the existing bandwidth a customer might have to AWS. And so this is where Snowball fits. This is a service that provides a highly ruggedized device that ships to your site and allows you to back up the data locally. And then once it's on the system locally, you send it back to AWS, and it is copied into our AWS cloud storage and placed in Amazon S3. And so this is a great option for customers that have a large baseline set, but then incrementals they are much less on a daily basis. And so they don't have to pre-provision all that bandwidth utilizing Snowball. And then you have connectors, and partners like CloudBerry, they offer native connectors to S3 classes, making transferring and backing up to AWS as simple as choosing the S3 storage class from the CloudBerry GUI. And I'll mention that CloudBerry, with our partnership, has support for all the storage classes within S3, and they're only one of 3 storage partners that have that support. So they're very tightly integrated here. Lastly, I'll talk about S3 transfer acceleration. So, S3 transfer acceleration takes advantage of our CloudFront's globally distributed edge locations that are throughout the world. As data arrives at the edge, it's routed to S3 over an optimal network path over our backbone. And so, if you were to centralize data into one bucket from all over the world, this would be a good option. Okay. Lastly, I'll talk on this slide about the AWS Storage Gateway. Storage Gateway is a a hybrid service that enables on-premise applications to seamlessly use AWS cloud storage. And so there are really three modes of operation of this device. There's file gateway, which provides NFS and SMB protocol support to an S3 backend. There's tape gateway, which provides VTL access, and volume gateway, which provides iSCSI access to block devices that are backended and persisted to S3. And so that's a little overview of our storage services. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about those storage classes that I mentioned. So S3 storage classes here have a wide range of different price points. And as I mentioned earlier, CloudBerry has support for all these different classes. So if you're going to access data quite often, S3 Standard is a good choice. S3 Intelligent Peering is a newer class which will monitor the access of the data that you're storing and move it to less expensive infrequent access if it hasn't been accessed for 30 days. Because data is being moved automatically by AWS in this class, we don't charge a retrieval fee for the data that's been moved to infrequent access. Instead, there's a monitoring charge for each object that you put in that class. And when you know data is going to be cold, which is often the case with backups, but you can't wait to restore that data before you have access to it, then S3 Standard infrequent access is a really good choice, which will get you to a lower price point and only charge you when additional fees when you have to access that data. But you'll have access to it immediately. To round out the S3 classes, you have S3 One Zone IA, and this is well suited for customers that feel they don't have to have data protected across availability zones and would like to lower their costs. And you know, I don't see this used too much in backup retention, but for cost-conscious customers with lower regulatory requirements, this could be a pretty good option. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so moving to the Glacier classes, this differs from S3 classes on the previous page, as data can be accessed only asynchronously. What that means is that data first has to be restored before it's accessed. And so obviously, this is suited for longer-term archive requirements. Glacier Deep Archive is the newest addition here, which GA'd in late March. Deep Archive is designed to provide durable, long-term storage at a price competitive with off-site tape archive services. So data that can be retrieved from this class of storage in 12 hours or less. If data needs to be retrieved faster than 12 hours, you would put it in Amazon S3 Glacier. And that provides you an additional option to retrieve data within minutes. Also, stored in Deep Archive is only meant for really long-term retention. There's a 180-day minimum for data placed in there. Of course, you can always delete the data if you need to, but you would be charged for a prorated 180 days. S3 Glacier has a similar model, but it's for less time. It's for 90 days. And so that really covers our storage platforms. If you go to the next slide, I just wanted to mention real quickly here that there are a number of certifications and compliance assurance programs that we have supported within our infrastructure. They run across healthcare, government, and financial regulatory requirements, and they allow customers to build their solutions to comply with these standards. And I hope that gives you a quick overview of the things that are available on the storage side in AWS, and I'll turn it back to David. Thanks.
All right, I really appreciate it, Peter. So if anybody, I should have mentioned earlier, if anybody has any questions, there's a questions panel where some of you politely told us you could hear us earlier, even though we couldn't hear each other. So go ahead, type your questions in there. We're going to get to them at the end, and we'll go through them as we find them. I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about CloudBerry and how we integrate with AWS to provide, a lot of flexibility for our managed service providers that we're providing backup services to. So what do MSPs run into when it comes to backup and disaster recovery? One thing is data. This is something that I hope to not have to talk about, maybe after this year. We've been talking about it for a while. It's still going on, and I still think it's important to discuss that data is everywhere. Your customers that you're supporting are creating a lot of it, whether it's, billing or, documents and Excel spreadsheets or, content that's being generated through the software and hardware services they have if they're in the medical or dental profession. But we see that data rates are doubling every 18, 24 months, and that data is being created everywhere on the servers, on their desktops and laptops, on the NAS devices that they have that they're using to store the data that they want to access in their environment. And the important thing is that this data needs to be backed up. It needs to be backed up to not only protect your customers from, business downtime, which can be hugely expensive and disruptive and could even cause you to go out of business, as we've seen recently with a medical practice in California that had 3 different offices and got hit by ransomware. And while these doctors were in their mid 60s and they were planning on retiring in a few years, they decided that it was just going to be too expensive and to get the data back, and they decided to shut down their practice. So data disappears for a variety of reasons, not only malware, but employees who maliciously delete it, but also employees who accidentally delete it, in addition to hardware and software issues. So there's a lot of ways that your data can disappear. Data disappeared can mean terrible downtime for businesses, which is very costly, but it also protects you. Because as an MSP, you want to be in a position to be able to sell backup services to all of your customers while still being able to make money. You're in the business of making money in the form of providing IT services. So providing solutions that are too expensive that you can't sell to all your customers or to any of your customers is not a great option for your customers or for you. Local backups are great if you can do them. They're obviously better than nothing, but backing up, on premises puts your data at risk from disaster or malware. Ransomware, will see the NAS devices that are being used for backup and will attack them just the same if they're not caught quickly enough. And there's also, you run the risk of some type of disaster, whether it's fire or, electrical short or theft. That data could disappear very quickly. And so what we find is MSPs are increasingly looking at the public cloud. Public cloud storage is a new target for backups. Now, there have been fears of the public cloud, and this is another slide that I hope to get rid of in the near future because we're seeing a decreasing number of customers who really have concerns about the public cloud. But there were a lot of misconceptions for a long time that it was very complicated to use, and it's really not. In fact, there are a lot of resources we have available that help you walk through the registration process with AWS, how to set up your accounts in your IAM, security to make sure that you can set things up properly. It's very easy to do. It's not really slow. Data is available for you to restore when you need it. Really, the limitations are going to be in the broadband connection that you have to AWS. It's not expensive. You get economies of scale. When companies like AWS are selling storage and storage prices come down, you not only find that more storage tiers get introduced, like one zone and frequent access and intelligent tiering and deep Glacier Deep Archive, but the prices tend to come down eventually too. Stress, well, what kind of stress do you run into? Well, having your data in the cloud, if you're really concerned that the data is not available locally, we have the option of running hybrid backups. Hybrid backups allow you to keep copies of your backups both locally in the cloud. Sometimes you want local backups because your latency is going to be very low. The restore speeds will be limited only by the hard drives and network connections you have in the office. If that's the case, do some hybrid backups. Keep local backups, but also keep your data for disaster safely in the cloud. Cost I kind of covered already, but security. Security is the last thing. Is my data secure in the cloud? Well, CloudBerry provides end-to-end encryption. That means we provide a TLS SSL type link up into the cloud. Data is encrypted at the source, so where it exists on the server, on the desktop, laptop, whatever. It's encrypted with AES 256 encryption using user-defined encryption keys, so you can track them yourself. They're encrypted. They're further wrapped in more encryption over the wire. And then if you want, you can use things like server-side encryption on the AWS side to wrap it up in another layer of encryption on top of what we've already done. So if you move to something like S3, let's say you're backing up on-prem right now and you're thinking about moving to the cloud, you do eliminate a lot of the cost and administration needed to run a private data center if that's what you're doing, or manage large storage pools at each customer. You don't have to worry about hard drive failures, equipment failures, administration around all of the hard disks and storage that you're managing in your environment. That means your planning, your growth, your capacity planning, and compliance are sort of taken care of. You saw the compliance on the previous slide from Peter, but things like capacity planning, while you should probably know how quickly you're growing just from a business perspective, you don't have to worry about making sure you provision new hardware in order to accommodate that growth. S3 and the various storage tiers will grow with you automatically. We know it's highly available and durable. That means it'll be available when you need it, that your data is not likely to disappear. There are many copies of your data made in most of the storage tiers within a single data center, or single region, as I should call it on the AWS side. So your data is available and it'll be there when you need it. And the nice thing about it is you're only paying for what you use. So if you need 50 terabytes worth of data, that's what you're paying for. You don't have to worry about provisioning 100 terabytes of storage in advance for local backups or for a data center you might be managing, and then having to pay all of those capital expenditures up front. Instead, it becomes an OpEx expense, right? So this is operation expenses. You'll pay monthly. Your cash flow is a lot easier. So CloudBerry provides something called our MBS, or a managed backup service, and it's a backup as a service designed from the ground up for managed service providers. And we provide seamless integration with public clouds, just like AWS, meaning that it's your storage. You've set up an account with AWS, it's your storage. You're just telling CloudBerry Backup how to get at your storage so it can back up your customers' backups to your own storage. That means you own it. You're not in a private data center. You're not locked in. Your storage is not locked in with a particular vendor. If you ever left CloudBerry for any reason, or you wanted to use local backups currently and then move to AWS, you can just move. You can change public clouds as needed. The data is yours for as long as you maintain your AWS account, which is nice. It's affordable, and we'll get to pricing later, but it just means you can tier your backup services for your customers in a way that allows you to make some money while providing the protection that they need and you need. You're an MSP, you're in the business of providing IT services. Any of your customers that are not backing up for whatever reason is a risk to you. We tell a story a lot about a MSP that had a customer that got hit by ransomware and they didn't have backup because they couldn't afford the backup service that the MSP was offering. And when they finally got their data back by paying the ransom, they dumped the MSP because they kind of felt like that MSP should have provided an option for them that was within their price range for backing up. So you should make sure as an MSP that all of your customers are backing up. Everything that's important to the customer should be backed up. It's a subscription model, meaning that you'll pay monthly, right, for what you use based on the number of licenses you have out there, which can really simplify your cash flow. You don't have to get into 1, 2, 5-year agreements like you have to with some competing services and worry about how you're going to pay for everything up front. We also work very closely with Amazon. We're a partner. They were the first cloud storage vendor we supported, and we continue to provide access to the more advanced features that are available, like IAM policies and lifecycle policies for your data tiering, so you can move data in automated fashion between the different storage tiers so you can save money. Synthetic full backups, so we can create new full backups of entire servers without having to, upstream all of the server data all over again. And even things that Peter covered, like S3 transfer acceleration is available, as well as AWS Snowball, which we also support. So if you're dealing with customers that say are in the medical profession, They're doing a lot of imaging, CAT scans and MRIs, which can be hugely expensive it's hugely huge, I should just say. They're just big. And it's going to be too difficult to send all of that information over their broadband connection to the cloud. What you can use is something like AWS Snowball. It's a secure hardened device that Amazon will send to you. You can bring it to the customer, run the backup to Snowball, and then Amazon, when they receive the device, will decrypt all the data and put it in your bucket for you for your customer. So it's a great way to seed a lot of data when the broadband connection won't support it. So what are some of the challenges? Well, we say we protect everything. So we protect all of your Windows, Linux, and Mac endpoints and servers out there. So that covers just about everything that most of your customers should have. We do file and image backup, so we can back up just the important files for your endpoints. You're probably not interested in backing up the operating systems. You can, but if you only want to back up, say, the document folders to make sure that any user-generated content is safely protected in AWS S3, you can go ahead and do that. Image backups are really can be used on clients, on workstations, but they're more for your Windows servers to make sure you can restore an entire server in its entirety using our bare metal restore capabilities. We also support virtual environments, both Hyper-V and VMware, so we can back up all of the virtual machines at the host level, as well as some Microsoft applications, including SQL Server and Exchange. Now, if you're using any kind of hosted applications like Office 365 or G Suite, we can also back those up. So that's always an option for you as well. And you backed up, but you don't back up for backup's sake. You back up so you can restore. So we can restore any files from any type of backup. So even if you're doing image or virtual machine backups, you can pull out individual files that you need restored. There's complete file versioning. So if you're doing a file-based backup and you want to restore, say, old versions of files or all files that were backed up or created between a specific date range, you have a lot of options out there to tell the agent what to restore, as well as restoring images to the cloud. So you can also do some restores to Amazon EC2. If you lose a piece of hardware locally and want to restore that image to the cloud, you also have that option. Now, our features are designed for MSPs. So we are a backup as a service, and we actually run our service in AWS because we find it provides the best reliability for infrastructure as a service type features. So we run run our managed backup service inside of AWS, and the console that is a thin client, obviously. It provides all your central administration and monitoring. You create all your customers, all your storage pools and buckets. You can monitor all your backups to see, which ones succeeded and which ones didn't and why. You can remote connect to PCs if you need to provide some support in case there's an issue. You can create backup and restore plans right from the thin client, including creating global configurations for certain settings you want to apply to a whole set of customers or individual customers or just, Windows desktops versus servers. You have a lot of options there. We do integrate with popular RMM and PSA solutions, like ConnectWise. And if you want to sell your service, let's say your MSP is named Acme IT Services, you don't want to sell it as CloudBerry, you want your name in there, you can certainly do that. We have full rebranding that we sometimes call white labeling that allows you to change the look and feel of the product. So what your customers will see is your brand. That way it looks like your backup solution. That's fine. We encourage all of our MSPs to take advantage of that option if that's something they want to use. And of course, we have full APIs for integration. Now, some of the technical features that we have in the product that solve issues, for MSPs already covered file and image backup. I'll mention again that we support synthetic full backups with Amazon S3. So if you're doing full backups of, say, you have a 300 gigabyte server out there, and you want to run full backups, say, every month and incremental backups in between. After the first backup is complete, the next time a full runs, we can create a new full inside of S3 without having to upload all of the full 300 gigabytes again. It cuts down the time significantly on how long it takes to create the next full. It also means you're not upstreaming a lot of data at the expense of maybe some other backups that need to run, because we understand that there's limited bandwidth out there. We do support hybrid backups that I talked about already. We compress your data, obviously, who doesn't, and why wouldn't you want it compressed? It'll save some over the wire transmission time, as well as reduce your storage costs a bit. And we provide the end-to-end encryption that I've already spoken about earlier. We can back up all your NTFS permissions. So if you're concerned about that, you have a Windows server out there, you're concerned that when you restore data, you're gonna have to reapply permissions to it. That's not a requirement. You can check that option if you want to back them up, and when we restore it, we'll restore the permissions. And as Peter talked about earlier, we support the full breadth of storage options that are available in S3 and S3 Glacier, I think is the current name. So you have your full S3 standard, infrequent access, your intelligent tiering, which will move your data automatically between IA and full S3 standard in order to save you some money. One zone IA, if you only want your data backed up to one zone, that's an option. It's a lot less expensive. And then if you need to move your data for archival reasons, long-term storage is S3 Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive, which is new. Now, how you move that data is entirely up to you. You can target any one of those storage classes directly with CloudBerry. So if you want to back up directly to intelligent tiering, you can do that. If you want to back up to one zone IA, you can do that. What most of our customers do is they back up to S3 standard and they use a lifecycle policy that you can create on the CloudBerry side, or you can actually create it in the AWS console. It doesn't really matter. We'll pick it up. We'll pick it up as an option, which will automatically move your data for you between the different storage tiers. So you could say back it up to S3 standard. After 14 days, I'm probably less likely to need it. Move it to say S3 infrequent access. Leave it there for 30 days, and after those 30 days are up, move it to S3 Glacier for a year, and then after that's up, move it to Deep Archive to save even more money for super long-term retention. So that is all available to you, including bandwidth controls, so you can manage your bandwidth at your customers more efficiently. Some of the advanced features we have in pricing, our backup service starts at only $6 a month, and that includes both file and image-based backup. There are volume discounts, so the more you buy, the more discount you'll get on that. There are no storage limits. We don't bill by storage limits. You're just going to pay AWS directly for how much storage you're using in S3, and then tier the offering for your customers. A lot of MSPs, because it's so inexpensive to buy, a lot of MSPs will include a base amount of storage and backup in their base set of services. Some MSPs will charge their customers by the gigabyte, and there's a lot of room, a lot of margin available to you based on what you're going to be paying for CloudBerry and AWS with what you're able to charge customers without charging them too much. You can still offer a reasonably priced backup solution to your customers and still make money, which is a great thing. If you need more advanced features, they're available with slightly higher cost licenses. And that's what I mean. The last bullet is really the main point. We want to offer a powerful solution to you with all the advanced features of AWS that allows you to make money and put you in a position of being able to provide backup services to all of your customers. So that's what I have to say about CloudBerry. I'm going to turn it over now to Doug and Jim, who are going to talk a little bit more about Proper Sky and how they're leveraging these solutions. So Doug, you there?
I think I am.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I do.
Okay, great.
I don't hear Jim yet. Hang on one
second. Oh yeah, I'm here. Hopefully.
Okay, great. I'm going to mute.
Okay.
Take it over.
Great. Yeah. So this is the part that I've been waiting for, because we actually get to hear from an actual CloudBerry customer who's also using AWS. So Jim, thank you for joining us today. First off, how long have you been a CloudBerry customer?
We've been a CloudBerry customer since 2013, almost 6 years. Actually, it'll be probably closer to 7 years at this point.
Okay.
This August, yeah.
And you were actually a customer before we had the MSP offering. Is that correct?
That is correct, actually. I was down in IT Nation. I sort of discovered managed services roughly around 2013. And I was like, wow, this is an amazing way to do business. And I looked at sort of all of our tools, and I actually reached out to the CEO Andy and the director of sales, Elena, and I said, listen, guys, I said, you guys have a fantastic product. I really think you need to be focusing on the managed services provider space. And I also think you need to simplify your billing. If we could get this down to a flat monthly fee per agent, we could sell it all day long. And so they did. Andy really put us in the first beta testing program. I think that was like 2013, 2014, right after we talked about it. And we've been happy ever since.
Great. So we owe you a lot, I guess, don't we? So, moving forward to today, how many customers and endpoints are you backing up with the CloudBerry Managed Backup Service?
So we've got roughly 1,500 endpoints, and we back up the vast majority of those, not all of them, but a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And we've got that distributed roughly amongst 50 customers, and our geo target is Philadelphia. So we're in and around the Philadelphia market. So the majority of our customers are there, but we do have a few that are nationwide, and CloudBerry is a fantastic solution for our.
Because I was going to ask about remote, especially like salespeople, or people that don't come into the office all the time. How does that, laptops? How's that been working out for you?
Yeah, so one of the things that, and I'm sure most of the MSPs in this call can attest, is we're seeing more and more folks that want to work from home, where they want to work, how they want to work, and we're not able to lock them down. Nobody wants to VPN in and mount their file shares anymore. So they want to work where they want to work, when they want to work, and how they want to work. Yeah. So for us, one of the big challenges is, like we could tell every salesperson in America, like, go ahead and save everything into, your OneDrive folder, or save it into your, Google Drive folder. Those get backed up. But the reality is that doesn't happen. Between accountants, attorneys, and sales folks, it just doesn't work. So we ran into a couple of situations early where we decided that if it was a high-level executive or a mobile worker or somebody that did something that was critical, that no matter what they said, we were going to back up the whole device, at least on a file level basis. And so that's where CloudBerry really shines. So we deploy the managed backup service basically to any remote worker, and we basically back up the user's profile directory. And then, any sort of Linux shares or anything along those lines, we back up as well. But those are few and far between. It's mostly Windows.
Okay, yeah, and because you're doing the file level backup as opposed to the image level, connections like, their home cable internet connection is probably more than sufficient to handle it.
Exactly. Well, and then the nice thing about CloudBerry is the bandwidth control, right? So if we start to see high latency or something along those lines, we can really fine tune and apply a different policy to that particular user, where we're capping off bandwidth at 25%, or we're doing the backups when the machines are on, after 6 p.m. when we know most workers aren't going to be working.
Okay, great. And you're using S3. Were you using a different storage before that, before you started using Amazon S3?
Yeah, so we actually, one of the big reasons we really liked CloudBerry when we first started looking was because we had customers that had all sorts of different backup requirements. And, we had been in a situation with a vendor where we were backing up to them and we wanted to leave, and getting all that data off was truly, truly cumbersome. So when we were looking for a new backup solution, we wanted something that was flexible, where we could say, listen, I want to just back up to the NAS in the corner. That's all this customer particularly wants or needs. And on the flip side of that, I wanted to be able to take, full level backups and ship them out to S3. And at the time in 2013, we had our own co-location facility. And so the idea was we would basically sell hosted storage. So we built out a data center, we had a SAN, and we had a big fat pipe, and we did all that stuff. So we were kind of all over the place. We had USB, NAS, our co-location facility. Some clients had FTP requirements. Some clients wanted us to back up from site A to site B to site A, et cetera. And we were trying to make money with the colo. So at a certain point, we started backing up our co-location facility to Amazon's S3, just to have an offsite, DR site. And we were just all struck by how little latency there was, how fast the speeds were, how good the compression was, and how rich the feature set was. And at a certain point, when the contract was due to renew our co-location contract, we decided that we were no longer going to be in the co-location facility, co-location business or do any cloud services, and we're going to go 100% pure cloud. So we basically went back to all of our customers and we said, no more NAS devices, no more site A to B, no more third-party FTP. We're going to be pure AWS S3 buckets.
Cool. Now, do you also, we talked about the lifecycle policies and storage tiering. Do you guys use that as well for your customers?
We do, not to full, I guess, affect, right? So one of the things, Amazon calls it simple storage service, but I would call that a lie. It is a incredibly complicated and robust product. And it is really, really complicated. It seems easy, but it can get very complicated. And actually, that's one of the biggest reasons why we like CloudBerry. Your understanding and knowledge of the platform is fantastic. It's amazing. But with that being said, we're using some lifecycle policies. We're always looking to optimize. I was pretty excited to see the new Glacier cold archiving, which is great for a lot of our HIPAA stuff. So it's very good.
Okay, great. And then I know we talked earlier, and you mentioned something about the backup to the backup. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of the MSPs on here have their favorite, on-premise whole disk backup solution. There's a ton of them out there. And we had a legacy product that we like, and it was very good. We got a lot of pressure from that vendor to sort of push our stuff to their cloud, and we did, but I never liked the feeling of being held into a single vendor solution. This is one of CloudBerry's strongest selling points is, you pick the data. So you want it to be Azure, it can be Azure. You want it to be AWS, it can be AWS. You want it to be an FTP server, your own server, you can do that as well. It's really flexible. So really, it's what we did is we wanted to make sure that our backups were going to an independent, neutral destination, so that if we ever wanted to leave that vendor or switch to a different product or go CloudBerry native for a particular host, we weren't beholden to that vendor. So what we do now is, as part of our standard, is pretty much every server that we deploy, there's 2 backup solutions, and CloudBerry is always on.
Okay, great. Switching gears a little bit, now we also talked about you actually help some of your customers move some of their servers and services to the cloud as well. And I understand CloudBerry has helped out a bit in that area too.
Absolutely. So one of the things is document retention requirements for HIPAA. I mean, it varies state to state, but typically you're supposed to hold on to all medical records for 7 years, right? So a lot of these doctors have old Windows 2003 or 2008 servers kind of laying around, and they're no longer using the software, right? They've moved to the cloud for whatever reason, or they've done whatever. So they want to and have a legal requirement to essentially hold on to all those medical records and be able to reproduce them, but they don't necessarily want a server in their back closet. And I certainly don't want to support a 2003 server in 2019. So one of the great things about CloudBerry is its interface. It takes a little getting used to the first couple of times you do it, but we use it for our stickiest jobs. So if we run into a server where we're like, listen, we want to get this server out of this doc's office, we want to get it into an EC2 instance. How do we do it? So before, we had to jump through all these hoops. We'd have to do, we'd have to do a P2V. Then we'd have to get the server to work in a virtualization environment. And then when we got the virtualization environment up, then we had to get it connected to either VMware or Hyper-V. And it was just a bunch of extra steps. So one of the really cool things that's built into the CloudBerry backup solution is direct to EC2 restoration. So for us, we basically put the CloudBerry Lab agent on the server, and then we basically start the migration process. And it never goes smoothly. It takes you a few whacks to get it, but eventually, once you do all the steps that Amazon recommends and you can use the CloudBerry Lab stuff appropriately, we've been able to get every instance that we've tried out into the cloud, which is pretty amazing.
Lost you, Doug.
Doug?
Yeah, we lost Doug again.
No.
Anyway, let me see if that was the last question, because he did send them over to you.
Yeah. So.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I had another call coming through. My bad. No, Jim, in terms of, David mentioned the command line interfaces it's going through, and I understand you've done some interesting things with the command line interface as well.
Yeah, so one of our philosophies is trust but verify, right? So one of the things that has always been a sticking point for us is great. The backup says that it backed up, but it doesn't matter until you have to do a restore. So we worked with a third-party vendor. We're a ConnectWise Automate shop. That's our RMM tool of choice. And I said, what I'd really like to do is have a way to consistently automate test restores. Like we would create a test file in every backup, and then we would restore it, check the date and time, check the MD5 hash sum to make sure that the file types matched up, and then we knew that our restoration was solid, particularly on the file level. And once we got into it, it's pretty amazing at how well engineered the command line interface is for CloudBerry. So not only is it easy to do the deployments, but it's very easy to automate a lot of the functions like testing backups and testing restores right out of the command line. And because of that flexibility, we were able to build a lot of the automation natively in our ConnectWise Automate product. So we've been very happy with that.
Cool. Anything else that you think the audience should know about CloudBerry Managed Backup and or AWS? If we haven't already covered.
Yes, a couple of things that I would say about CloudBerry. So I would say that of all the vendors that we deal with, that your sales and support team are the most knowledgeable about the Amazon platform, far and away. We had a situation where we were trying to figure out how to easily distribute our buckets and maintain, isolation between clients and a whole bunch of other stuff. And, my engineer, one of my employees, a great guy named Colin, we worked on this together, and we ran into a few issues, and we reached out to CloudBerry, and they actually worked with us, held our hands basically, and then we designed an entirely new bucket policy that accomplished everything that we need. It was like a work of art. When you read the IAM policies and the bucket policies, it was really incredible to see how much and how well they knew the product for S3 for sure. And then in regards to Amazon Web Services, as managed services providers, a lot of us are slinging Microsoft stuff, and one of the things is you see Azure and it's pretty good, but I never wanted to feel like I was in a situation where I was locked into a particular vendor. And not only does Amazon Web Services give you that, but I would say that as IT people, we're seeing more and more non-Windows workloads coming online, and I think if you're in the managed services business, it's time to really get serious about looking at not Windows and getting out of the old sort of mantra of Office 365 Active Directory. And I think CloudBerry is a great solution, and I think AWS is the platform of choice. I am enamored and just amazed day by day at all these things that used to take us months to do. We can accomplish in a minute. It's incredible. It really is.
Great. Well, I'm smiling over here. So we appreciate the kind words there, Jim. Now, so it's actually time for Q&A. So if anybody has questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. And Jim, before I let you go,
I think what I want to do, Doug, is there's two questions I'll answer, and there's actually a couple of questions for Jim in there. But what I want to mention is, in case folks have hard stops, I just want to talk about this slide for like 10 seconds. Just a list of links. The slide deck will be made available, or the presentation will be made available to anybody who's registered, whether you had to leave early or you stuck through it with us. So there are a bunch of good links up there for the case study for Proper Sky, all about how CloudBerry works with AWS, including a great white paper, the ultimate MSP guide, and also the MSP Voice podcast. Your MSPs and Doug, who's on the call, who just you spoke with Jim, hosts a great podcast called MSP Voice, where he talks to MSPs about MSP things. I like that word, things. It's not CloudBerry based. It's sponsored by CloudBerry.
MSP things.
Yeah. Anyway, so now I'm going to go back to Q&A. Let me answer a couple questions, and I'll let Doug talk to Jim about some
Okay.
of the others. So somebody asked how resource heavy the remote agent, the agents uses absolutely no resources unless it's running a backup, and you get to decide when those backups run. Most customers like to schedule backups to run off hours if possible, but if you're concerned that, say, some remote desktop's going to be offline because they're going to shut it down and you want to run during business hours, you certainly can. You have ability to limit how much upstream bandwidth is being used when it's going to the cloud. So that's a way to slow things down if you need to. You can also decide more technical things like the number of threads that are going to run in parallel, and by limiting that, you can eliminate any effect that the agent has. But generally speaking, the agent's a very low impact to the host itself. Pricing, somebody mentioned, we discussed it. Pricing starts at $6 a month before volume discounts for file and image backup in the same license. A little bit more for SQL Server and Exchange. And a little bit different pricing. I think it's $15 a month to start for VMware and Hyper-V, and that includes 2 sockets for the host. So we don't license by the VM. You can, of course, back up things by the VM if you want with the individual licenses, but if you want to back up at the host level, then you're looking at a 2 CPU socket license for about 15 that backs up unlimited VMs. The other question I wanted to get to was somebody asked about hooks for PowerShell and Python. So we have a few different APIs. There's a RESTful API that allows you to work with our management interface that's hosted in AWS. And then there's a full command line interface that's available on the agent. So you can hit that command line interface from PowerShell scripts or Python scripts if you happen to be on Linux or Mac. So that's entirely possible, but it would be through the command line. And then I will turn it over to you, Doug, just to ask Jim some of those final questions.
Sure, Jim. So first up is, how do you manage all of the encryption keys for all the clients? That's a great question.
It's a really good question. So we use, this is actually a better question for my engineer, but we use the password encryption and a master key. The master key is protected, and then we use independent password encryption for each of the backups. At least I think that's how it's done.
Okay.
Yeah, so some of our MSPs, will rotate encryption keys, not by customer. They're in charge of managing the backups. A lot of times they'll use the same key across their customers and then maybe rotate it as needed, either by regulations for compliance reasons or just, for the sake of rotating it frequently.
Exactly. Well, Colin just slapped me. He's on the call here. So EAM policies is the other way that we do it. So we create independent policies inside of EAM. That was actually one of the big challenges we had, was the number of keys that we had to manage during the encryption stuff. And CloudBerry's
we do get asked about key management, and we're hopefully that'll be something that CloudBerry is able to introduce to our customers in the future. So that would be a hope. Go ahead, Doug.
Okay. So I think we got that one good. So next up, it's saying you mentioned doing away with local backups of any kind. I don't know if you kind of said it, but I don't think that's exactly what you meant.
Yeah.
What about the client that's on a really slow internet connection? If they just have a cell phone, whatever. So it's kind of a 2-part question, but.
Well, so in a situation like that, right, where the internet's not a viable option, we're going to have a local backup. And the thing that we've learned with ransomware that I would recommend to everybody is make sure that you're not using Windows NT authentication and that you're mounting your backup device using some sort of third-party authentication as a destination. So if you're in a situation where you have, I don't know, I've got a friend of mine who's in West Virginia that takes care of some Amish dairy farmers, and they, believe it or not, have a QuickBooks server that's out in the middle of a dairy field that they turn up. They have to for tax purposes. And he was telling me some of the challenges he has, and that's what they do. They basically have a NAS, and they use I don't know if they use CloudBerry, but they use a backup product, drop their data set to it with a non-Windows password.
Okay. And then this might be the last one for Jim. Are you using CloudBerry to do SQL and Exchange?
Yes, I actually I think CloudBerry's SQL product is one of the best. They really understand the sort of low-level SQL backups, so it's very easy to do diffs on SQL databases independently. In terms of Exchange, we were using it for Exchange, and I think Colin can confirm this, but I don't think we have anybody on-prem anymore that's using Microsoft Exchange, with one exception, and they're going away at the end of this year. So.
Okay, cool.
All right, a couple
And
more
then,
questions and then we can wrap, I think. We're going to run a few minutes over, but there seems to be a lot of folks that are sticking around, so we might as well get to them. Steve asked, is it possible to offer zero knowledge backup with CloudBerry? And I have to admit, I don't know what that means. So Steve, if you're still online and can provide some follow-up, or somebody on the call knows what that means, I won't even guess. I have some ideas. But...
yeah, well, I was gonna say it could either mean one of two things. One, they have no idea of how to use backup or AWS. But two, which is what I'm thinking, is maybe can you do it without the customer even knowing that it's installed and running and doing it for them?
Yeah,
The answer,
I mean, you obviously can. If it's the latter, you certainly can. I mean, if you have a customer that's signing up for IT services and you want to provide backup, you can deploy, we didn't talk about agent deployment, but you can get the agent on the endpoints and servers in a variety of methods, push them out through some PSA tool. You can install them silently from, say, Windows MSI, silent MSI install, do an interactive install, but that's the only time you're gonna have to touch your endpoint. Once the agent is on there, you can manage your agent upgrades automatically from the console. You can play with them in a sandbox. When you've vetted them and make sure that they're okay, they will automatically the agents will automatically upgrade themselves. You can manage all of the job management, your backups and restores, everything from the thin client management interface we host in AWS. If you're talking about having to know a lot about that, yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, but you can also hide the tray icon,
yes.
No shortcut,
if you need to, so customers don't even have to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was, it was a question about backing up cell phones. So we don't actually have any cell phone support right now. We do have an iOS app you can use for management. So if you happen to be an Apple user running iOS and you want to make sure that you are notified through, native iOS notifications when something happens, you can run the iOS app. Now, obviously the management interface is thin client. You can run it from even a mobile browser, but if you want a slightly more interactive experience, we do have an iOS app for that, but we do not currently back up cell phones. So probably something we'd probably want to reach out to you more about to understand exactly what your needs are. Some people, what the question was, why do some people introduce backup plans on a per gigabyte basis? I won't mention the competitor. Well, because a lot of competitors have private cloud storage and they force you to use it. And the way they sell it to you is sort of an all-you-can-eat licensing, and you just pay for your storage. That's where your data is going to go. They know it's going there. They've worked in the cost per gigabyte as something that is going to provide the right solution to those customers. And honestly, that's what you are sort of paying per gigabyte when you use the public cloud. You use AWS, they're going to charge you based on your average use over the month. Based on the number of gigabytes that are used, but you're not paying more for the solution than anyone else. You're getting it at AWS pricing in the public cloud.
And there's a clarification on the zero knowledge question.
Oh, okay.
He says, what I mean is that as the MSP is unable to access the data itself, only the customer has access to the data. So basically, from a liability perspective, the MSP can set up the backup, but only the customer can access the data the MSP can't.
Yeah, I suppose you could have. So what you can do with CloudBerry is create sub-administrators. That's primarily used for other folks within the MSP, providing some value to administration. They want to be able to set up backup jobs or be able to test with doing restores. But you could create sub-administrators that are at your customer that allow them to log into the management interface and manage the environment. What you could also do is just tell them to create their backup jobs if they want from the agents themselves. That information will migrate up to the cloud storage, up to our management console. So it'll all be stored there. It doesn't matter where you create the backup job. If it's in our hosted AWS console or on the agent, it all ends up back. You wouldn't be able to see their encryption keys that they typed in. There's no plain text option to see them. So they could certainly decide on the encryption for those backups, which would prevent the MSP from being able to restore the data. You would still be in a position of being able to see the files unless you do use something like file name encryption, which is an option we have, I believe, with S3 that it will encrypt the file names as well. So there are some options out there that you can put your customer in some control of managing those backups for themselves without the ability of the MSP to decrypt them. Now, since you're the
and you would
agent
obviously
in charge,
you would obviously use the customer's AWS account and not the MSP's AWS account to do that.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So because that's another way to kind of separate it is, as the MSP, for most of your customers, you're going to set up the AWS account, you're going to use your account. But if your customer has sensitive data, they can set up an AWS account that only they have access to, provide the keys, like you said, from the client, set up the backup. You'll still be able to see what's going on in terms of status, but you won't have any access to the data.
Well, so it's probably a wider discussion. You would have access to the backups because they're in managed backup. Now, this is what you can do. If you have a very specific customer, and I'm just going to assume they're a small customer, they may not be. We do have standalone backup solutions. These are the solutions that Jim was probably working with before we had our managed backup solution. So you can buy Linux, Windows, or Mac backup with a perpetual license without any overarching management. So you could go to a customer, install the agent, have them hook it up to their own backup storage, and then there's nothing in the cloud other than wherever they put their backups with their own encryption keys. So that may be an option. Yeah. But if they're able to keep the encryption keys from you with managed backup service, then you won't be able to restore because you won't have the right key to do the decryption.
Great. And I think that's all on the Q&A.
All right, perfect. So let me wrap up myself, and then I'll turn it over to you, Doug. I want to thank Peter from AWS. Doug, I'll let you thank Jim in a second. I apologize for the technical issues. We'll work with GoToWebinar and figure out what happened so it doesn't happen next time. Anybody who wants to re-watch this, if you stuck through it, you're probably not going to re-watch it, but maybe you will. You want to get to the links. You want to see these links, or you want to watch it again, or share it with others at your organization. We'll send you out a full link to it. So Doug, I'll let you thank Jim, and then we'll wrap up.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Well said. Man, if you want.
I really do. Yeah, I really do appreciate, Jim, you coming on and sharing your experiences. Thanks again for pushing us towards the MSP space all those years ago, and thanks for being a great customer. And thanks everyone who listened, who watched as well.
All right. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for such a great product and being a great partner.
All right. Thanks.